Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a beer that I think will be an absolute monster, and I'm really curious to see how this one turns out. So this review is a little bit of a special one. This is going to be my Valpurgis Night 2020 review. For those of you who don't know, Valpurgis Night, whatever you want to call it, this is a holiday that dates back from the 9th century that's celebrated across Central Europe and Northern Europe, and it's a tribute to St Walpurgis, who was quite prominent in tackling the whooping cough pandemic that went across the continent in the 9th century. But these days basically they make a big massive bonfire and get drunk, and that's exactly what we're going to do tonight, so why not? But for this review we are going to head over to the west coast of America once again, and we're revisiting one of America's premier craft breweries, and this is a kind of series of theirs, if you like, that I have never tried anything from before, so it should be pretty damn good. For this one then, we are going to go to Chico in Northern California, and we're having a taste of another beer from Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. This is my first that I'm trying from their Trip in the Woods series, their barrel aged series. It's the rum barrel aged quad, and it comes in at 11.7% ABV, so it should be a little bit of a monster. I'm a huge fan of the Belgian Quadrupels, which you'll know if you've watched the channel before, and to try my first one from Sierra Nevada I think will be quite special actually, so hopefully it turns out to be very nice. I've heard that this is a very good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So I think this is a very fitting beer for us to review on a night that we make a big massive bonfire. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one. I'm really curious to see what this has in store for us, and a huge thank you to my friend Matthias for sharing this bottle with me. He told me basically, take this bottle, do a review of it on your channel on Valborry, and then we'll share the rest after you've made it. So here we are now. So big shout out to Matthias for this review. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Sierra Nevada before. No doubt you will see some more at some point in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the American beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Sierra Nevada Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've told you before, Sierra Nevada Brewing Company are one of the kind of premier American craft breweries. These guys were founded back in 1979 in Chico in California, when the founders Ken Grossman and Paul Camusi decided to expand their homebrewing hobby into a fully fledged brewery. So Ken first came to Chico to visit some friends who were enrolled at the local university there, and he ended up falling in love with the town, and he set up a home brewing shop, and this was where he met Paul Camusi, and they homebrewed together for a number of years. But together they built much of their own equipment out of recycled dairy tanks and things like this, and then in 1983 they officially opened up their portfolio with 3 different beers. Over the coming years they continually expanded, and then in 1987 they purchased the 20th Street plot, which has been the home of Sierra Nevada Brewing Company ever since, and the tap room opened up a few years later in 1989. They continued to expand over the next decade or so, but then in 1998 Paul Camusi took the decision to retire, and he sold his share of the company to Ken Grossman, who remains the largest single shareholder in Sierra Nevada Brewing Company to date. But in 2008 they introduced their beer camp event, which is where they collaborate with local restaurants, other local breweries, and various other organisations to create lots of collaboration beers. So you'll always see things from the Sierra Nevada Beer Camp that are very unusual, but since 2010 they've also had a partnership with the new Clairvaux Abbey in Northern California, where they've been producing a few different Trappist style beers, and from what I understand they are trying to get a Trappist a Trappist mark on their beers actually to sell them as properly official Trappist beers. We'll need to see how that goes. But in 2012 they also announced plans for a second brewery at Mills River in North Carolina. That went on to open in 2014. I think most of the Sierra Nevada beers that we get over here in Europe are brewed in the Mills River facility, and they've also been credited by the EPA, the American Environmental Protection Agency, as being one of the greenest companies in America. They've got a lot of different awards for their environmental things. You know, a lot of their grains and stuff that they use, they go to local cattle farmers. The brewery runs basically on solar power. There's a whole host of pro-environment sort of things going on at Sierra Nevada, both at their facility in Mills River and at the one in Chico, which is pretty impressive. But these days they're producing well over 1 million barrels, US barrels of beer per year, which I think, I can't remember how that translates into hectolitres and stuff like that, but they've apparently had the same brewmaster since 1983, and they've produced a ridiculous number of different beers. You know, you've got the original classics in there, the Pale Ale, and you've got the Stout, the Kellerweiss, you've got all of these kind of things, and then you've got the higher alcohol ones, the Torpedo, the Narwhal, the Bigfoot. You know, the Bigfoot is a really kind of cult classic in American craft brewing, you know, the first big barley wine that was produced, from what I gather. And yeah, you know, Sierra Nevada are very, very well respected in a lot of quarters. You know, these guys were the first American craft brewery that I ever heard of. Probably these guys, Steam Brewing, were the first ones who really kind of got everything going for me. So yeah, definitely cool to try something a little bit different from these guys. And you know, the great thing about Sierra Nevada is they are a larger by volume producer now, but they still produce lots of different small batches and things like that that go out there to be tested, and they do stick to that very kind of small batch brewing route things, and as a company they are very, very ethical too. So yeah, if you want to try some of their beers this year, 2020, I really recommend that you try out the Hoppy 40th. I'm not sure how widely available that beer is going to be after this year ends, but you know, the classics, the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, the Narwhal, the Imperial Stout, the you know, the Bigfoot barley wine, the original Pale Ale, those are the beers that you really, really want to try from these guys. One of the really kind of classic American West Coast breweries, and you know, definitely one of the more established names over there in the American craft beer scene. You really, really need to check out some of their beers if you haven't had the privilege already. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Sierra Nevada Brewing Company at the moment. A very, very well respected brewery, as I said, and this is my first encounter with their Trip in the Woods series. They've got various different series of beers over there. The original kind of core series, they've got the high altitude series, I think they call it, the slightly more highly alcoholic ones. They've got the beer camp series, and then they've got this series as well, the Trip in the Woods. I think there is one more series that perhaps I'm missing, but you know, a very prolific brewery, these guys, and I think they've got somewhere in the region of like 600-700 different beers that they've done. I think that's according to Untappd, but when you consider that these guys have been around for like 30 years nearly, and the Untappd figure is probably quite inaccurate when it comes to the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's all you really need to know about Sierra Nevada Brewing Company for the moment. They've always remained in the same family, of course, which is pretty damn impressive. So yeah, that's a great thing about this brewery, and hopefully I can get out to California at some point and visit the original brewery on the 20th Street plot in Chico. We'll need to see if we can sort something out to do that. But yeah, check out the website and stuff, check out the brewery, my other reviews that I've done from these guys before as well, and you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then and see what we've got in store. So as you can see with this one, the artwork on this is just absolutely beautiful. This beer I think came in through one of the Tillfälligt assortiments in Systembolaget here in Sweden. I'm not sure which one, because we did get a few different things from the Trip in the Woods series. They've got Bier de Gars, they've got some Imperial Stouts and stuff like that, but you know, this is one I think Matthias just fancied. This a rum barrel aged quad, an 11.7% quadrupel, this one, aged in some kind of rum barrel. But it says on the back here, this classic quad in rum barrels is a nod to the great Trappist brewers of Belgium. Deep ruby brown in colour, this beer is rich and full bodied with the style's familiar dark fruit flavours, with the yeast creates a hint of spice. Rum barrels impart delicate sweetness and complexity to this beer that can be enjoyed today or cellared for years to come. When beer meets barrel, incredible things happen. The passage of time and the influence of wood combine to create a final product much greater than some of its individual parts. Our Trip in the Woods series is designed to highlight the complexity and interplay between beer and barrel. Each beer has matured in wooden casks originally used to age in mellow spirits, and at the time in slumber creates rich and layered flavours unique to this difficult and hands-on process. So yeah, pretty damn cool, this one. This one, it's 1 American pint, I think it says, which is 9 fluid ounces. So in terms of volume, if it's this 1 American pint, I think, I'm not sure about this, I don't think this is 1 American pint. I would have thought this was a good bit more than that. 1 American pint, I think, is about 450 millilitres, and this beer is definitely more. This is more like a kind of 700 milliliter things. It says on the side here it's actually 750 millilitres, and I'm pretty certain that's not 1 American pint. I'm sure an American pint is about 450 millilitres, whereas a British pint, an imperial pint, is like 562. So I don't know why it says 1 pint on this one. So yeah, not sure about that, but yeah, this is more a bomber, which an American bomber I always thought was like 680, 700, something like that. So this one is a little bit bigger than that. But yeah, as you can see on this one, there's one of these kind of corky tops on it. I'll just let the camera focus and see if you can see that. You can see the Sierra Nevada sort of brewing symbol on that. You can also see on the cork, there is a little bit, it does say Sierra Nevada on there. I'm not sure how stable I'm going to be able to hold that for the camera for you there, but we'll get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. I think this is going to be, you know, an absolute monster of a beer. An 11.7% rum barrel aged quad. How often do you come across something like this? There we go. Not too much in the way of smoke coming out of this, but yeah, there you can have a little look at the cork of this one. As you can see, Sierra Nevada on the side, and there is the little cork protector as well, just to let you have a little look. But yeah, let's get some of this out then and we'll get on with the taste, and I'm very curious to see what this has in store for us. I think this will be an absolute monster of a beer. I'm not going to be greedy with this one because, like I say, this beer is intended to be shared, so I'll take, this should be about enough to share in this one. So yeah, this is an absolute monster, you know, 11.7%. This is just going to be an absolute beast of a thing actually. So yeah, just look at that. You can see straight away this one's poured a lovely kind of dark mahogany rosewood type colour. If I shine the light through this, you really can see it's got a lovely kind of ruby, very dark ruby edge to it. Doesn't show up so much on the camera, this one, but you can see the head on this. It's about half finger actually, even with the small amount that I've poured. It is about a half finger of a frothy, kind of very light sort of beigey colour there. There's 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. There's a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but overall it does look very, very nice, I have to say. I think this is just, you know, it looks pretty typical of a quadrupel. You do expect these beers to have that big, massive kind of chestnutty type colour to them, and it's got everything you would expect of the style. In fairness, you wouldn't really expect anything less of a big quadrupel. 11.7% is actually even quite heavy for this style of beer. Normally you would expect them to be like 10.5 or something like that. The tripels usually sit around the kind of 9.5%, and the quadrupels are usually around the 10.5%. So 11.7 is pretty hefty when you consider this style. You know, the obvious comparisons are the Rochefort 12 and the Westfletchen 12 as well. You've also got La Trappe, who have their quadrupel in there as well, and I think all of those are like 10.5, 11 at most actually. So yeah, this one does have a little bit of a kind of step above those in terms of its alcohol content, but yeah, it does look very, very nice. And as I say, it's got a bit more, it is actually quite clear if you hold it up to the light. That doesn't really appear to be too obvious on the kind of general camera though, just because of the darkness of the beer itself though. But yeah, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. Let's have a closer look at the aroma then, and to just see how we get on with this one. I think this is going to be an absolute monster. Yeah, straight away with this one, you get everything that you would expect. This is just a ridiculous, ridiculous beer. You know, you've got everything that you could really want from the style. You get that lovely big kind of oaty smoothness that you expect of a barrel-aged beer. You can smell the kind of rum, sugarcane notes out of it. A lot of lovely vanilla in there. You know, those are just the kind of backbone of this beer, and then on top of that you've got everything that you actually expect of a kind of regular quad. As I've always said, when it comes to actually barrel aging beers, it takes the mouthfeel and stuff a little bit down, but it gives you some really crazy kind of infused aromas, and you know, a lot of the focus on a beer like this is going to be on the nose, but that's not to take away anything from the flavour. So like I say, you can detect the whole kind of underlying of this beer, which is a lovely big smooth oaky character. There's a lot of lovely vanilla in there as well, and you get that lighter kind of sugarcane note from the rum, which really is great. I like how that kind of integrates itself into this beer. The one thing I'm noticing about this though is that you get a hell of a lot of kind of, there's quite a nice almost tobacco-y type quality to this one, which is interesting. You get a lot of that kind of fresh tobacco note out of this beer. It's almost a little bit leathery in some degrees as well, in some respects. But yeah, once you get past the kind of infused barrel-aged notes, there's a lot of brown sugar in there. You've definitely got some of this big, thick, treacly molasses quality to the beer, but you know, the more and more that you smell of it, you start to get the lighter, kind of sweeter notes. You do get a very kind of bright, sweet caramel there. There is a little bit of biscuitiness to this one, but there's no doubt that it really does lean more towards that big, thick, treacly molasses type quality, which is what you'd expect. Molasses and treacle, of course, are just synonyms between American and you know, British English, if you like. So lots of big heavy brown sugars in there. I would suspect from the colour of this one, the boil in the brew has been very long in this, probably at least 5 or 6 hours, something like that. That's the real way that you get this amount of caramelisation of sugars in there, and of course the barrel aging is only going to kind of amplify those types of flavours actually. So yeah, the big brown sugary notes in this one are just really insane. So you've got this lovely big kind of brown sugary treacle molasses type backbone to the beer. It's got a little bit of a phenolic quality to it. You know, you've got some of these kind of big cakey notes to the beer, a little bit of tobacco kind of infused in with that, some nice oaky woody notes in there as well. It really does smell a little bit like Christmas pudding, this beer, to be honest with you. I've told you in other reviews, my dad always loved Christmas pudding. My mum used to make Christmas pudding for my dad on his birthday in February, and this beer really reminds me of the aroma of her Christmas pudding. She used to put a bit of kind of Captain Morgan's rum in it, I'm sure, and you know, light it on fire. That was what you were always supposed to do to kind of char the edge of a Christmas pudding, from what I understand. But you do definitely get that lovely big rum barley-aged quality out of this one. You've got that in terms of the aroma. We've not even covered the fruity side of things yet, but you do get a hell of a lot of a kind of phenolic quality out of this one, that sort of cough syrupy medicinal type thing in there as well. But it's a very nice blend of fruity and kind of cakey aromas in this. The kind of cakiness that sits on top of the woody base of this beer, I think, really is very nice. This one I don't find too yeasty, because quite often with these big quadrupels you do get a little bit of a brown bready kind of yeasty quality in there. You do get some of that with this beer. You get that typical sort of brown bready note out of the beer as the base, and you can feel it sort of thickening up the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, there's a few kind of nutty elements in there. You've got the tobacco-y notes and the leathery notes that I was talking about, but on the fruity side of things, very kind of phenolic, very sort of kind of fruity and juicy and things as well. I'd be curious to know what hop they've used in this one. Maybe a little bit of Williamette, since it's an American beer, but maybe they've gone to the classic European side of things, used a little bit of Northern Brewer from Germany, or a little bit of Bramlin's Cross from England. Those are the classic kind of red fruity hops actually. So on that fruity side of things, you definitely get a little bit of that datey kind of pruny side of things from the more phenolic part of the beer. You've got some juicy kind of blackberries, blackcurrants, and you've also got a little bit of that lighter kind of figgy note. But I think the further you go into the aroma with this one, you really start to get more of the kind of juicier blackcurrants and blackberries, but the figs really do linger there. The sort of phenolic side of the beer as well is there, and you've got all these other different elements of the quadrupel kind of lingering in there as well. But overall, I'd say the woody kind of barrel-aged notes in this are very prominent. When it's, you know, when it's sold in a big bomber like this, that's not really surprising. But yeah, the main thing to take away from the aroma part of this review is that this is just an absolute monster. I think we've spent about 3 or maybe 4 or 5 minutes talking about the aroma of this one, and that's really the attention that the aroma deserves. You'll get a hell of a lot out of a beer like this, so do take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma for yourself before you get stuck into it. But I think we should try this one now. So this one is the Rum Barrel Aged Quad, coming in at 11.7%, part of the Trip in the Woods series, their barrel aged series from Sierra Nevada Brewing Company over in Chico in California in America. This is my Valborg Valpurgis Night 2020 beer review. So happy Valpurgis Night, happy Valborg to you guys. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that really is pretty damn special, I have to say. Massive thumbs up to Sierra Nevada Brewing Company for this one. This is a beer that is pretty special. I think Matthias told me that he paid around 200 crowns for this one, so that's about 20 euros probably, somewhere in the region of £16, something like that. So for a bottle of this beer, it is expensive generally, but when you consider what kind of beer it is, it's like a good wine. You'd easily pay £20 or whatever for a good bottle of wine, and this is no different. When it's a big quadrupel beer like this, especially when it's rum barrel aged and things like that, the price of this, I think, is pretty reasonable, especially when you consider the fact that it's an import. I'd be really curious to know what the price of this one here in Sweden at 200 Swedish crowns, that's about $20 US. I'd be curious to know what a bottle of this actually costs over in America. I think you'd probably pay around $18 or $20 for this anyway. I don't think, I don't think much profit has actually been made by, there'll be no profit being made by Systembolaget, but I think even with the importers' markup and things, I think you're probably going to pay about the same price for this one in Sweden as you would in America, actually. So do let me know if you've had this beer and you're watching from the States. Let me know what this one actually cost you in US dollars. It's roughly 10 Swedish crowns per US dollar, actually, so it's quite easy to work out. But I will say this is just a beautiful beer. It's definitely worth splurging on something like this every so often. Give yourself a bit of a treat and try something special. Valpurgis Night, Valborg 2020. It's kind of interesting. In my city here in Lund in Sweden, they've covered the park in chicken manure to stop people kind of congregating there because of this whole coronavirus thing. So it's quite funny. So you stay in and you have a beer like this. That's what you do. So yeah, let's try and break the flavour down. Let's try and break down the flavour of this one before we get stuck and think about it a little bit. So yeah, straight away with this beer, you can really feel a lot of the you can really feel these nice kind of you can feel the lovely kind of yeasty qualities of this beer. You can feel the kind of big woodiness just blanketing the middle of the tongue there. You get that lovely oaky quality just blanketing the whole middle of your palate. You've got some really nice kind of rummy notes to this one, which is what you expect when it's rum barrel aged. I find the rum really quite smooth in this one, but yeah, that big oaky rummy kind of quality with this one is really prominent, which is what you'd expect. But as you go towards the back of the palate, you can feel it kind of drying out a little bit, and as you push further forward on the tongue, you start to get more of the kind of vanilla notes out of this one, and a little bit more of the smoothness to this one too, which is great. But in the very centre of the palate, that's where you get all the kind of brown sugary complexity with this one. And as I've told you before, when it comes to barrel aged beers, barrel aging always thins out the mouthfeel of the beer. And I'd be curious to see what this one tasted like before it went into the barrels. But it gives you, the barrel aging gives you a lot more of a kind of infused flavour to the beers, which is really great. So this one you can feel that this beer has kind of thinned out a little bit as it's aged, so that gives you another really interesting perspective to think about with this one. But as I say, really smooth, kind of oaky, woody base to the beer. You can feel it's a little bit drier towards the back of the palate and a little touch spicy, but then as you move further forward, you've got some of the kind of smoother and slightly sweeter vanilla type flavours there, and in the centre of the palate you've got those lovely layers of different kind of brown sugary notes, so you can feel that slightly kind of thicker, big treacly molasses flavour sitting in the very centre of the palate. As you move on top of that, you start to get a little bit more of this kind of cakey, Christmassy pudding type quality, and you get the sweeter caramel as you gradually build up on top of that. But the way the brown sugars come out in this beer is really nice, and you can almost feel the kind of rummy qualities like that. It actually reminds me a little bit of Havana Club, to be honest with you, or Kraken rum. Actually, it's got a little bit of that very lighter, sugarcaney, sweeter type quality to it, which is nice. Some of the rums can be quite dark, of course, but it's really got a very nice balance between these different kind of things, actually, which I think is really nice. But yeah, the blend of flavours that's going on in here is just, it really just is absolutely beautiful, I have to say. So a big thumbs up to Sierra Nevada for the way this beer's turned out. I think this is very, very nice, actually. Yeah, it's just crazy, this one. So if you go to the front corners of your palate and then move in a little bit, you do get some of these kind of woody notes in there as well. You can feel there is almost a kind of tobacco-y type flavour to this one. The tobacco-y notes, I think, come out towards the back of the palate, but as you move kind of further forwards, it kind of smooths out and becomes almost a little bit more kind of leathery and things. But behind the fruity third, as I always say, the centre of your palate, you get a little bit more. Towards the back of the palate, you get the more kind of spicy side of things. In the centre of the palate, you get the more kind of sweet, boozy side of things. And then on the kind of front third of the palate, that's where you get the kind of fruity side of it. If you go to the back of the palate, it's more spicy, and you get more of the kind of smoothness. You do get a little bit more of the smoothness of the wood as you reach the front part of the centre third of your tongue, and the kind of vanilla notes come out there as well. But the layers of brown sugar in here are very, very kind of interesting, and I like how that everything just kind of builds on top of each other. As you reach that border between the fruity side of the palate and the kind of centre of the tongue, you do get more of that kind of cakey, Christmas puddingy type thing out of it, which is really great, actually. I like how that all kind of builds up. It's really got this kind of Christmas puddingy type note to it in the centre there. As I say, my dad always used to like Christmas pudding for his birthday cake, so I'm quite familiar with that flavour. So between the sort of malty side of things and the yeasty side of things, and also the fruity side, there is this just sort of Christmas puddingy thing, that sort of charred, Christmassy pudding type quality there. The further you go into the aftertaste with this one, you start to get more of these big kind of brown bready notes out of the beer as well, and you do find the back of the palate just drying out a little bit and becoming a wee bit more charred the further that you go into it. So yeah, there's a lot of really kind of interesting things coming out of this beer the further that you go into the flavour with this one. So it's really, there's so much complexity to this beer, it's really hard to focus on any one thing, but what you can say about it is that it's just a beautifully done quadrupel. This, you know, big thumbs up to Sierra Nevada Brewing for this one. They've pulled off something that is very, very nice in my opinion. So yeah. So yeah, I really, really like how this goes together. I think we've kind of covered everything in the malt base there, but I will say about this one is that it definitely gets more kind of brown bready the further you go into the aftertaste, but you can really feel that mainly around the kind of edges of the palate. The brown sugars and the sort of barrel aginess, you can feel it sort of, this beer does dry out in the middle of the palate, and you start to get more and more of the kind of infused flavours that you expect of the barrel aging pushing their way out the further you go into the aftertaste too. So yeah, this one, there's so many layers to this beer, it's sort of hard to just kind of focus on at once, but lots and lots of really kind of interesting things out of this. On the hoppy side of things then, if you go to the back corners of the palate, there is a wee bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward from that on the sides of the tongue, you do get a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you reach towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of a floral aromaticity out of the beer, which is nice. I think, you know, normally with these quadrupels, I think they use low alpha acid hops, or they'll use you know, old hops, so that it doesn't kind of overpower a lot of the flavours of the beer. Quite often these Belgian styles of beer are brewed with like brewing sugar and things, rather than kind of adding in more and more malts, because that would take the mouthfeel up. So the Belgian beers quite often do have an element of crispness to their mouthfeel, and they feel lighter in that regard because they're using brewing sugar rather than you know, putting so much malt in. So you'll notice that with this beer as well. The middle of the palate does feel a little bit lighter than the kind of surrounding things. But yeah, the older hops in this one just give it that nice little bit of bitterness. I think you're only talking though about 30 IBUs at most with this beer. A little bit of that earthiness there, more herbal coming forward, a little bit of floral character there, but then round the very front curve of the palate it's very light and very grassy, and then behind the front curve of the tongue, that's where you get some of these really nice sort of oily, fruity characters coming out of the beer, and it's really nice how that all goes together. So yeah, the fruity side of things then, as I always say, behind the front curve of the palate you get that big oily bubble, and that's where the whole kind of juicy fruity thing pushes its way out of this beer. I do actually find on the front part of the palate this beer is quite dry in a lot of regards. When you take it in, it does have a little bit of that really kind of plum, raisiny sharpness to it, but then it just kind of opens up a little bit more the further that you go into the aftertaste. It's not got cherries or anything like that in it, this beer. Really more of a kind of plum sharpness in the beginning. You can feel some of these kind of cakey notes, that almost charred Christmas puddingy type thing, just pushing its way into the kind of fruity part of the beer. But then as you go further into the aftertaste, you start to get more of a juicy blackcurranty, blackberry note out of this one. As I say, hop wise, I think we're looking at Williamette, Northern Brewer, Bramling's Cross, something like that in this beer. You do get a little bit of the juicier fig. If you move back from the very front edge of the palate, you do get a little bit of that lighter juicy fig, but then as you move further back on that front oily part of the tongue, it really is quite sharp and raisiny or plummy, to be honest with you. So I like how that all goes together in this one. This is a really, really nice quadrupel beer, especially when it's rum barrel aged. You've got a lot of complexity to this one, which you know is quite difficult to come by in this style. You get a lot of complexity from the style anyway, but to add the rum barrel aging into it just adds a whole other layer. So I find that overall this quadrupel is quite cakey in some regards, but it is quite, I find it a little bit drier actually. I think when it comes to barrel aging these beers, it can make them a little bit drier. So there's a few aspects of this beer I think are quite dry compared to others that I've had in this quadrupel type category before. But it's a big thumbs up from me, this one, and this is a really, really interesting one to review actually. So yeah, definitely an interesting beer, and very fitting for Valparaiso's Nat, of course. So yeah, the more and more that I drink of this as well, I can feel the fruity part of my palate just juicing up a little bit, and you do get more and more of the kind of blackberry, blackcurranty type notes out of this one the further that you go into the aftertaste as well. So yeah, that's it. That's another really interesting point about this one. More of the woody notes and leathery notes start to push their way out on the front of the palate as well. This beer, it really is ever evolving. It's quite difficult to keep track on what's going on in this one, so I hope this review has been somewhat kind of comprehensive and cohesive as to the type of flavours you'll get. I feel that this one, it is difficult to keep up with all the different things that are going on in this one. This is definitely one of the more complex beers that I've reviewed in the 2,000, nearly 2,200 beers that I've reviewed for you. So yeah, take that statement for what it's worth. This is a bit of a crazy beer, this one, and I think it's turned out pretty damn nicely. So let's focus on the mouthfeel now. I think we've covered the flavour pretty comprehensively, to be honest. So mouthfeel wise, I'd say that this beer is at the bottom end of full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth on this. It's quite an oily mouthfeel, but at the same time it does retain a little bit of that kind of cleanliness and wetness. On the hoppy bitterness side of things, I think you're talking maybe about 30-ish IBUs with this beer. It does have a little bit of bitterness to it, and it's got a good bit of dryness in there as well, but you've got it very well balanced with some of those kind of brown bready, kind of bread crusty notes. The more and more you go into the aftertaste with this one, you start to get a little bit of that brown bready, rye bready kind of thing. That bread crusty note comes out further on the back of the palate there. You do get more of that, so you can feel the malt base in this one dry out, but the very centre of your tongue really gives you that sort of caramelly wafer, treacly molasses sort of thing, that whole kind of pyramid, if you like, of brown sugars. You really get that out of this one. So yeah, this beer does dry out the further you go into the aftertaste. It's got a lovely bit of sweetness to it, and then the fruitiness is quite... I think the fruitiness has a good balance between being wet and being a little bit more oily, but I like how it all goes together with this one. This is just a very, very quirky beer in my mind, and I think the whole rum barrel aged thing with this just adds a ridiculous layer of kind of complexity to it. This is a beer that's very difficult to get your head around, but you know, you taste this and you know this is a pretty damn good beer. That's a good way to kind of sum this up, to be honest with you. So let's just leave it at that for this one. This one is the Rum Barrel Aged Quad at 11.7% ABV from the Trip in the Woods series at Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, originally from Chico in California in the USA. A very, very fitting beer to celebrate Valpurgis Night, or Valborey 2020. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on this one. I feel this has been a little bit of a longer review, but yeah, this is a beer that definitely takes a little bit of time to get your head around. So yeah, if you get the chance to try this one, you will enjoy it. But thank you again for watching my reviews, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Rum Barrel Aged Quadrupel from the Trip in the Woods series at Sierra Nevada Brewing Company in Chico in California. A huge thank you again to Matthias for sharing this beer for me, and I hope that you guys have a very nice Valpurgis Night, Valborey 2020. I'll catch you guys tomorrow with another kind of regular review. Slàinte, skål, make sure you check out this beer and try some of the beers from Sierra Nevada. The Hoppy 40th anniversary is a really awesome old school West Coast IPA, so catch that one while you can. Cheers.